Tileah, how are you going?
I'm good, thank you, Zan. How are you?
I'm good. It's really nice to see you.
Good.
I was wondering if, for those who haven't yet taken the Aboriginal Narrative Practice course or haven't had an opportunity to meet you and your work, if you want to share a bit about your mob, the country you're on, and the context that you work in.
Yep. So I'm Dirrumbul, Kalalea, and Yidinji So I live in North Queensland on Gimoy Wallabara Yidinji country in Cairns. I work at the local hospital in the emergency department. And I also work for Dulwich Centre, teaching narrative practice, and I'm very lucky to be involved in the Masters of Narrative Therapy, where I support the First Nations students to go through that program.
So, just a few things then.
Just a few.
Just a few. So, I was really excited to have this conversation with you because we've had lots of conversations in the past about queering narrative practices, and also, of course, you've taught me so much about decolonising practice. And I was hoping that you could share a bit today about how those two things fit together in your work, whether you find that there's tensions, alignment, incongruence, partnership. Just give us a bit of a taste of what this looks like in your practice.
For me, I think that queering my practice has been a part of my journey to decolonise. It's one and the same, because the colonial constructs of gender and the ways that we should be performing gender and sexuality and, and I guess then personhood. How should we be performing our personhood? And so for me, absolutely, I've learned so much from you as well, Zan. And it's all been such an important part of decolonising, not just my practice, my mind and my life, actually. It's been a great learning journey. So thank you for all your tips.
Do you, it's really exciting to me to hear you talk about how much those things align for you, because that feels true for me as well in my own practice. And obviously I'm coming from that, from being a white settler and unceded territory in Australia. I was wondering, do you have any stories of practice that illustrate this overlap, this kind of partnership that you're talking about?
Yeah, I do. And, I think it's important to say that it's been a journey as well, and that I've also learnt a lot from some mistakes that I've made. And, I think back to those times and think of, if I had have done things differently then. And, thankfully, I haven't caused, hopefully, I haven't caused harm, but I've been part of a system that could cause harm. And so, yeah, I've got lots of stories, but certainly as I've learnt more about, I guess the ways that identity can be decolonised through both gender and sexuality, just the opportunities for conversations have been absolutely wonderful. We had a previous chat and I was thinking about Howie, who I met in the emergency department, and Howie had arrived at a local clinic nude. So it was at the end of Pride Week, and they'd turned up to a clinic nude. And so we're brought in by ambulance with kind of, breakdown what's happening. Maybe the psychosis, lots, of course, already lots of ideas about what was going on for Howie. And when I got the referral, I was introduced as by, their name assigned at birth. And I was introduced that I would be seeing a 50-year-old man. And, I'd heard a bit about the story. And when I first came to introduce Howie, I could see that they were really nervous. And I said, what would you prefer to be called? And I was met, as is often the case as I've gone on this learning journey, met with a bit of shock around this because, you know, I think nobody had asked this. So first of all, what I do often with lots of people is I offered a cup of tea to Howie and to check that they were comfortable. And I noticed that Howie was kind of under the hospital blankets. I knew that they didn't come in with clothes on. And I said, is there anything that would make you more comfortable? And Howie said, could I please have some clothes? And so one of the things that's been really important is to, you know, decolonize ideas of fashion and clothing and you know, make them non-gendered. And so I asked Howie if they have any preference for the clothes that I get. And I said, we have 4 boxes. One is for what we call women's skirts and pants. One is for what we call men's pants. Then we have a box that we call for women's tops and another for men's tops. And Howie said a little bit more confidently, can I please have a skirt and a t-shirt? And I said, of course. Do you have any preference of which box I get the t-shirt from? And Howie said, just something that goes with the skirt, please. I kind of winked and said, well, that goes without saying. I'm not going to get you something not fashionable. So, you know, I really think that having done these actions of respect and welcome, that Howie was now able to talk about what was going on for them. And they told me that when they were a child, you know, they grew up being supported by their mother to dress in girls' clothes up until they became a teenager. So I guess, you know, those formative years, you know, Howie talked about how much they were nurtured to be themselves. And then this was up until they became a teenager. And so as an adult, Howie talked about how they tended to dress as a man, live a man, particularly in order to keep safe because they were homeless. And so on the streets, it was safer for them to form gender as a man. And so over the, sorry, let me, this is my dog. Over that week of the Pride Festival, you know, I guess with all of the celebrations, you know, how we felt that it was time to really come out and celebrate who they were. And so this is why they turned up at the clinic in the nude, because it was rejecting clothes and fashion and saying, I am who I am. And, you know, and this was really a story that was in total contrast to the one that we had been invited to take on about, you know, this is not normal. This is, you know, breakdown, psychosis, drug use, all of these other assumptions, I guess. So, you know, through learning from Howie, just of this practice of welcome, I guess it's really been a learning for me to always go into meeting people with just, you know, the question, to ask and not interpret any of it.
Yeah, I've heard you speak before really in a lot of detail about practices of welcome and how much that fits with decolonising and how much, you know, here in all the First Nations in Australia, welcome is an incredibly important part of culture. And it's really interesting to me the way that fits with greeting people who are sexually and gender expansive. And yeah, I'm just wondering if you could speak a bit more about the practice of welcome and how you came to that, or how you came to naming that practice.
I didn't name it, so it had certainly been named before. And Auntie Barb Wingard in particular has talked a lot about welcome being central to, you know, to our practice, because if nothing else, when people are, you know, marginalized or excluded from society or their family or their school or organization or whatever it is, that welcome, you know, into telling your story. And I don't just mean in a physical space, but, you know, to be welcome to say, what's going on for you? Tell me your story. I'm here to hear it. I think without that, I guess we come in with all the constraints of and binaries of, right, wrong, normal, not normal, we bring those into the conversation. Whereas when our welcome is genuine and open, and when we're asking about who are you, what is your story, I think that there's so much more story that we can be invited into. I think with Howie, had I just have said, asked kind of questions about, I don't know, I can't even think of them anymore, but those stories that go into it with those ideas of what is right or wrong, that I wouldn't have got this story of this kind of lifelong journey of, identity. I just think that there's so much more story available to us.
And have you found, like in your practice since then, this connection with Howie, has that shaped your work moving forward? What do you do differently as a result of meeting Howie?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that always sticks in my mind, the kind of, the phrases that I go into every interaction with is ask, don't interpret. And so when you can ask about everything and not interpret anything, so whether it's like I could have gone into the assumption when Howie asked for clothes, in the past, my first response would have been to go and get clothes from the 2 boxes of men's clothes, which I have to get a lot anyway because they're the only ones that fit most of the people that come through. But I could have gone into that with just kind of this idea of, well, this is normal, and I make the assumption there. And so I think just being invited to never make assumptions on any of it has been really special.
And can you think of any other times when that's been really crucial, like recently in your work?
Yeah, I mean, even very recently, I was talking with a young Aboriginal person who, and I kept saying bub because they're younger than me, and they expressed their appreciation that I didn't call them, that I didn't gender even those, comforting kind of relational words, when a lot of people do. So a lot of people would call them bro, and just even to not gender those words, and just to not put my interpretations on any of it was particularly welcoming for them.
And I don't know, I wonder if you want to share anything about the stuff that's been tricky in the journey, the explorations that you've been doing, because none of this stuff is easy. Is there anything that sort of stands out that has been really challenging?
I guess making mistakes, because I'm cisgendered. I haven't had to go through the world with that added assumption, and I guess the journey of being, and you've been really instrumental in that, Zan, just to be able to ask about, and not feel comfortable with making mistakes. I don't mean that because I don't want to feel comfortable with making mistakes. I want to learn from them. But, to acknowledge that it's been a journey and that it's all part of a decolonising journey and that we're all learning this. I think that's, been a really kind of important thing to remember. And, I mean, even in talking about a person before I did it, where I automatically went to call Howie he, but then to correct it and not feel as though, made this terrible mistake. And, but, and to have conversation around that with people when you do it, I think has been really important for me.
Mm. I'm wondering about, like, is there anything that you would want to share with other practitioners? It's probably a big question, I guess.
I think, well, I think that a practice of, I mean, to decolonize, you know, we talk about decolonizing our practice, but actually what we mean is to decolonize our world, you know, and all of it, to decolonize our minds in order to, you know, change the way things are being done and ultimately to save the planet. I think that, you know, just to be, yeah, that ask, not interpret. I think I was saying to somebody the other day that the adventures of you know, decolonizing your mind and being able to queer our world, you know, so much more fun. So I think that, you know, and just the stories that I hear, and that, you know, I think back to, you know, maybe 10 years ago when I knew less than what I do now. There must have been so many stories that I didn't have the privilege of hearing, because of, you know, I had also been colonized to have ideas of, you know, binaries. So yeah, I think that it's just so much more fun to queer our practice and as part of decolonizing our identities.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me and share. I think this is going to be a really wonderful addition to the learning that people are able to do in this course. So thanks, Tileah.
Thank you very much, Zan.